Hey everyone, I hope you're doing well today. I just wanted to come on here and make a video for you real quick because I heard from Dr. Nez that after the first unit exam, a lot of you were wondering how you could improve your study strategies as well as habits so that you can actually perform better on the Unit 2 exam and the future exams in this class. And so, as a former student of Bio 31 and as your SI leader as well, I thought I'd just put together a few slides on what you should be focusing on when you are building up yourself for the exam. And this is going to specifically relate to the Unit 2 exam in some ways as well. So, let me go ahead and share my screen and show you what I've got. All right, so Bio 31 study tips. Let's get right into it. The way I'd like to break this down is into two main categories. So obviously, there is a lot of stuff that you can do for yourself to prepare before the exam comes around. These are more daily things that you can do, incremental pieces of information that you can store in your mental library over time. And then by the time the exam rolls around, you're feeling very confident and comfortable with the material. And so things will go a lot more smoothly. You won't have to worry as much during the exam. But there's also some component of test taking abilities as well that you have to factor in. Tests aren't a leisurely walk in the park. They are timed and they are a bit stressful. So, what can you do during the exam to deal with that kind of environmental pressure as well? That's what that is going to focus on. But let's start with what you can do before the exam. So, this is a slide that I've been sharing in my SI sessions and I've been showing to my students who attend. Essentially, it's my way of breaking down concepts in in the plant unit, specifically because the plant unit is definitely, in my opinion, the bulkiest unit in terms of conceptual material. There's a lot of moving parts, and it's kind of hard to sift through all of the information that's coming at you. It's a barrage of information. So I developed this three-step process for breaking down those concepts. The first step is isolating a specific concept that you would like to break down. So, what does that mean, isolating? I don't mean just isolating a concept by lecture, right? You're not just talking about plant evolutionary history as a whole or photosynthesis as a whole. Some of those things are really, really complex concepts that have a lot of different segments in them that are much easier to break down than the whole concept as a, full picture from the lecture. So, but when I say isolate, I mean taking the lecture topic and breaking that down into smaller concepts. And one example would be if I was looking at photosynthesis and I wanted to understand it better, I might break it down by photosystem 2, photosystem 1, the ATP synthase, and then the Calvin cycle, and tackle each of those individually before I think about looking at the big picture and putting them all together as one cohesive image. And then the next step is summarizing. So, yes, you look at the nitty-gritty details of the component that you're focusing on when you isolate, but the nitty-gritty details aren't what you're really going to be quizzed on or tested on in an exam. What you need to have is a broad understanding and ability to extrapolate the information that you are receiving in these smaller components. So summarizing is what's going to give you a lot of time saving in the future as you're studying for the exam, as well as during the exam, and really, really during the exam, actually, because essentially you're extracting the main takeaways and you're focusing on those specific things that are coming out of the component that you focused on. So, for example, one thing that I might do to summarize is look at plant evolutionary history, specifically the development of some specific adaptations over time. This is another slide that I've used in my sessions that I've introduced to students that should help them sort of break down the adaptational progression of land plants. So as you can see, there's land plants. What's the first group that falls under that? Bryophytes. And all of these other groups fall under it too. So that's why it's this big umbrella across. But then you have the next development, which is like vascular plants. So now we have another delineation. Your lycophytes are the first group that fall under vascular plants. And gymnosperms and angiosperms also fall under there. So that's why they're under that full umbrella. And then you have seeded plants. So gymnosperms and angiosperms, they are seeded, but lycophytes, bryophytes are not. So that's why they're under that umbrella. And then I put some, information in parentheses to distinguish between gymnosperms and angiosperms as well. So summarizing really synthesizes the most important information from the material in a concise and easy to digest way so that when you're coming back to this information, you don't have to relearn everything again or think about some of the complex missing parts. You have the main takeaways available for you at your fingertips. And I want you to think about this, that summarizing doesn't have to be bullet points, right? Some people, yes, bullet points are an easy way to keep track of information, but summarizing can be like the diagram here um, that illustrates that progression of major adaptations in land plants over time. So whatever format works best for you, and that's also something you should try and figure out about yourself. Are you a visual learner? Are you a textual learner? Stuff like that. That should be the method you should be using to summarize information from these components that you isolated. And then the third step, which is probably the most important step, is the ability to apply your knowledge by developing a new question or metaphor. And I say question or metaphor because these are great ways to test how well you can apply knowledge. But of course, that's not necessarily the end all be all. There might be other ways you can test that application. But um, you already know that this application testing through question development is embedded in Canvas, right? With the mock exam questions that Dr. Inez, asks you to do as an assignment. So that's already a really great way that you can be testing how well you understand the material by how developed your questions are. Do they really ask questions that force you to extrapolate information? And then when you're forced to extrapolate information, can you do so logically within the framework that you've built? So I do encourage you to take that assignment seriously because it's a great way to, give yourself a check and see how well you're doing with the material. And then the other way, which is maybe not used in Canvas and by Dr. Inez, is by creating metaphors. And that's something I like to do in my SI session sometimes, is you create a metaphor that I guess parallels the actual concept, but reframes it in a new context. Um, One example I like to use, it's a very basic, bare bones example, but something I like to use in some of the sessions is like using the parallel of preparing a Starbucks order to a plant life cycle. You could say like the order itself is not going to result in a completed drink, and the barista by themselves is not going to result in a completed drink. But when you put the barista and the order together, then they can make a complete Starbucks drink. And the parallels in the plant life cycle could be the order and the barista alone, right? They can't do anything. They're just the gametes for a plant. They're these individual haploid stages. But when you bring them together and they can create a complete product, which would be like a fertilized ovule, right? As opposed to the order and the barista could have been the sperm and the unfertilized ovule. This would be the fertilized ovule. This would be the diploid stage, and that's like that more complete unison of two haploid into one diploid product. similar, bringing the barista and the order together to make one complete Starbucks drink product. So obviously that's not for everyone, and that's totally understandable, but some people do better with material when they have it in a context that they can relate to better. So if that's something that describes you, then I would definitely encourage looking into trying that out. And then here's some other stuff, resources that you should be using if you really need help on material. So, cheat sheets, Dr. Nez talks about them. You should definitely be creating them. I encourage you after every lecture to create that summary on your cheat sheet. So a summary of the lecture in like a little box, or maybe it's a page. You want to try and make the information as concise as possible so you're not like flipping through pages of notes when you're taking the exam. But if you have to go through a full page to put down the information from the lecture, then so be it. As long as you know how to navigate it, it should be very well organized so that when you're taking the exam, you know exactly where to go in your pages to find the material that you're looking for. So cheat sheets, really great resource that you should be continuously working on throughout the unit. Office hours. This one's a given. You know it already. Dr. Inez is such a useful and helpful resource, and she's really nice as well. She will help you with the material that you are maybe having trouble understanding. So if you can make it to office hours, those are always a great opportunity to get those questions that you have answered. There's also tutoring, so maybe you can't make office hours. Um, Tutoring is offered by COSAC as well as Peer Connections for Bio 31. So if you're really looking for one-on-one help, that's guaranteed. Tutoring would definitely be the place to do that. And that's a little more flexible because you can schedule those tutoring sessions around your own, day and stuff like that. You don't have to worry about time conflicts. And then SI sessions. Of course, I'm going to be a huge proponent of SI sessions. Um, I think that we cover a lot of useful material in SI sessions and break it down in very unique ways that you might not get the opportunity to do in a tutoring session or even in the lecture. So yeah, those are always there for you. Obviously, some people can't make it to SI sessions. Um, because their schedules conflict, and that's really unfortunate. I wish I could hold more sessions or bend my time to fit more people in, but I have my own schedule, so I have to keep them at a certain time. But if you can't make the SI sessions, my email is always open. It's here on the screen, neil.chitale@sjsu.edu. And also every Friday, I'm opening up a discussion board. I don't know if you've seen them. I made an announcement for like maybe the first one, and since then I've kind of just been posting them silently. Those are also a great way to ask your questions, put them out there. Maybe your classmates will answer them. Um, if not, I would definitely answer them there. And if it's a question you think that many people would benefit from, then I think the discussion board would be the best place to put it, as opposed to sending it directly to me, because then I'm only sharing that information with you in a direct email. So, those discussion boards have been pretty quiet and lonely. But if you think about a question that you'd like to ask, I'd encourage you to put it there before coming to me with your email. If it's something more complex, then definitely email me at the contact information that you see on the screen. And then if you didn't know my session schedule, that's there for you on the screen as well. Wednesdays 5 to 6 p.m. and Fridays 11:30 to 12:30. Those are both online, so you don't have to worry about coming to campus or anything like that to attend those. Another incentive I have for coming to my SI sessions, it's something that I'm doing is if you attend even one of my SI sessions this unit, I am willing to give you access to the slides that I use in all the other SI sessions that I have for the unit, even if you can't make it to those. So even making it to one SI session could be really useful because you could get access to all those other slide resources where we do practice problems. We, tackle concepts in very unique ways, and there's also other tips And breakdowns like this plant umbrella, there's more resources like that in those other slides. So I think SI sessions and all that I have been providing from SI are really useful resources if you want to take advantage of that, because that's totally up to you. All right, so that's a lot that you can do before the exam, and I do encourage you to do most of your prep before the exam, because that's the most you can do for yourself. But let's say you already think you did a lot for yourself before the exam. Let's say you were preparing and you had your notes, you had your summary sheet, you attended a couple sessions, stuff like that, and you still felt that the main problem was what was going on during the exam. Well, um, I think the best way to tackle the exam is to be organized before you head in. So right before you head in, make sure that you have all the resources that you need at your fingertips and disposable to you. Cheat sheets, like we talked about, that's something that you're building up over time. So that's already developed. You have it ready to go on the side. Have the lecture slides up. Maybe you don't need to have all the lecture slides available, but maybe the ones that you think you would struggle to remember the most information from, or you might need to go back to reference for some clarification on a concept during the exam. Lecture slides would be really helpful. And then again, if you attend SI sessions, then having those session slides might be useful as well because some of the concept breakdowns that we have might synthesize and summarize the material in a much easier way to digest in that time crunch. And then the last thing I have is pacing. Um, I'm sure you all know this. This is pretty obvious, but you should always go for the easy points first. So all the questions are pretty much worth the same amount of points on your exam. So you don't have to worry about, oh no, this question is worth this many points and this one's only this many points. Like everything is about equal. So really, what you should be looking at is what are the problems I can definitely get the points on first. Don't jump around your exam looking for those easy points necessarily at the beginning, but continue through your questions as they come until you find a question that you find is really hard and you're like, okay, I'm gonna have to come back to this because I cannot handle this right now. Let me look for the next easy question and then try and go sequentially because jumping around too much will also cost you a lot of time, but avoiding hard questions, hitting the easy questions first, and then leaving those hard questions that are worth the same amount to the end will really make this the most cost-effective way to take your exam. And yeah, that's it. That's all the advice I have for, studying for the exams, before the exams, during the exam. Um, I'm sure a lot of this is familiar to you. Maybe you knew all this stuff, but before the first exam, you didn't have the motivation to do all of it, or maybe you didn't know, and now you do have a clear idea of what you can be doing to improve. We still have plenty of time in this unit to really kick it up a notch and make sure that we're very prepared for the next exam. So take all of this advice in mind and implement it into your study strategies as best as possible. And yeah, that's all I have for today. I hope more of you show up at SI sessions if you can, because like I said before, I think they're a really great resource. But if not, hopefully you benefit from the advice that I shared in this video. And I wish you all the best of luck in Unit 2.